Well, it was just a few weeks ago with back-to-back hurricanes that hit the Tampa St. Pete area, and the second of which doing some significant damage to the Tropicana Dome, the home of the Tampa Rays, with a city that was already, we thought, poised to build a new stadium for their team. There were some concerns as to where the Rays would play. Now, it appears as if next year everything is going to be set up to play at the Yankees spring training location. But there have been some changes in terms of the progress on the Rays' new stadium and any repairs that might be made to the Tropicana Dome in order for them to finish out their term there before the new stadium is complete.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the moment, we talked a lot about, hey, if the Rays need places to play, we've got a nice big stadium here in Omaha that sits empty for a good chunk of the summer, especially after the College World Series. Maybe they could play a few games here. Well, that was a few months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Things have changed. And even after Major League Baseball made it sound like, okay, yeah, they're going to be fine. They're going to be here and they're going to play in, the area. They're going to be in the copious minor league parks we have in this area. They'll be fine. The new stadium will be built, all as well. Not so fast, my friend. And to help explain that situation, joining us from the offices of the Wall Street Journal, writer Jared Diamond, who covers baseball for the WSJ. Jared, thanks for joining us. Appreciate you coming on.
Glad to be here. Thanks.
Well, kind of fill us in on what has changed in the last few weeks, because apparently it sounded like a procedural vote making progress on the new stadium did not go as planned.
The situation with the Rays Stadium could best be described as a complete mess, and nobody has any idea how it's going to play out. But this is basically where we are now. A few months ago, the Pinellas County Commission, the politicians in charge of all of this, were scheduled to vote to approve some bonds that were going to be used to fund a stadium in St. Petersburg, which had been agreed upon by the team and the county and the city. And then in the wake of the hurricanes, which obviously had this massive effect, that commission inexplicably says, you know what, we're going to push this vote back. We're not going to vote right now. I think they were concerned about what it would look like to approve big public money for a stadium while tons of their constituents were underwater and out of their homes. We're going to push this back. Well, that was a big problem because it pushed it back until after Election Day. Suddenly, 2 new people were voted into this commission that were anti-stadium. And now there's some question about whether this stadium gets built at all. Fine. Okay, they have to work that out. But here's the other problem. Like you mentioned, Tropicana Field is destroyed by the second hurricane. It needs about at least $55 to $60 million of repairs, might be more. The city is saying, we don't really know if we want to repair your stadium if we don't know you're still going to be playing here in a new stadium in the future. So now the Rays have this big mess where they don't know where they're playing in the future. They don't really know where they're playing after 2025 because they're not sure Tropicana Field's ever going to be fixed. And my understanding is they are now operating under the assumption that the earliest Tropicana Field is fixed is 2027. That's 2 years from now. So the Rays have a little bit of a problem. They're basically homeless.
So, Jared, going to the story, and the reason certainly that we wanted to have you on today was when you wrote the Rays might have to look outside the Tampa Bay area altogether, at least temporarily. Shacking up with the Yankees likely won't be a viable option after 2025. One possibility, according to people familiar with the matter, could be playing at the site of the College World Series in Omaha, Nebraska. So is that something where the Rays, I guess, in theory, would be interested in coming to Omaha, or that Omaha would be interested in welcoming in the Rays? I wonder which side is kind of saying, hey, we would like to be involved here.
Yeah, interesting question. So let's just start at the beginning here. The Rays this year, like you said, are playing in Tampa at the Yankees spring training facility. They're paying the Yankees for that opportunity. The Yankees don't really want them there. They're just kind of taking them in because they were dealt this really bad hand on really short notice. And it is what I know, what I've been told in my reporting, is that this is not going to be a multi-year arrangement. The Yankees say, we'll be happy to have you now. You're desperate. We're not taking you back. Like, this is our facility. We use it for our minor league team. You have to figure out your own problem in 2026. So what are the Rays to do? There aren't a lot of options, right? They're in Florida. It's a terrible place to be playing baseball outside, first of all, in the middle of the summer. There isn't another like domed stadium in Florida that they could go to in their region. There isn't really another major league ready facility in the Tampa Bay region except for Steinbrenner Field, which sort of means, right, we got to look outside. Well, where are you going to go, right? The thing about baseball stadiums, it's not really easy to share. Not like a hockey or basketball arena where there's days off and you can kind of schedule around. Baseball, they're playing every day. You can't just schedule 162 games in a stadium that's also being used by another pro team. Omaha, as you guys well know, that's the biggest baseball stadium in America that doesn't have a full-time professional tenant. It's essentially a major league ready facility. I'm sure there'd be some work required, but it's sort of the closest to major league ready in a place that you could play baseball in the summer that has 20,000 seats. And it kind of just makes sense. And I could tell you now that, the Rays thinking about playing in Omaha this year, that was not just speculation. That was something that they did, consider before the Yankees kind of stepped up and said, yeah, we'll take you here, which is what, they'd rather stay in their region. And that's what they did. But they were sort of thinking and poking around the possibility of having to play in Omaha this year. And I think they sort of just recognized that if we're going to be stuck having to go somewhere, probably just on a temporary basis, I don't think anyone's really thinking about Omaha at this point as a permanent relocation spot. It just seems like the most logical sort of plug and play place if you need somewhere to go in 2026.
Talking with writer Jared Diamond of the Wall Street Journal, whose story on this broke last week. So would the idea be, or at least what the conversation is, because certainly as we talked it out here a few weeks ago before all of this new stuff developed, it was an idea of, well, the Rays might have to be kind of like a vagabond franchise where they play some games here, just based on who's available. Would this possible 2026 solution be a full year solution in Omaha? Or is it the idea that, well, they could play X number of games here because obviously the College World Series will take up some space? Or how do you see that possibly playing out if Omaha is a viable option in 26?
I think the hope would be that it would be their full-time home, and possibly for more than 1 year. We're just talking about 2026 now, but there's a reasonable chance Tropicana Field's never fixed. It's a possibility. The Rays need a permanent home, and I understand why the city of St. Petersburg is saying we're not going to pay $60 million to repair this place if you're just going to either have a new stadium coming or you're going to leave our market entirely. Right. So there's a chance that they're just sort of homeless for 2 or 3 years. Right. The best case scenario right now, even if they move ahead with this new stadium in St. Pete, and who knows if they will, we'll find out more in the next few weeks and months. The best case scenario right now is 2029 that it opens. It's not opening before that, which means there's at least a sort of 3-year period where they are potentially unaccounted for. And maybe they fix the trop. There's still a lot of moving pieces. But there's a scenario, a very plausible scenario, where 26, 27, 28, they do not have a full-time stadium. And they're not going to want to be nomads, right? That's something that the players' union would have a problem with. Yeah. The players would hate it. The players need homes, right? They're not going to want to live out of suitcases 162 games. They need a home base. And Omaha has sort of emerged as a viable possibility. Now, it's not the only possibility, right? There's other places that are being considered, right? One possibility, for example, is, they share the stadium in Nashville with the sort of hope and expectation that they move to Nashville permanently. That's something that's been bandied about. But in terms of a temporary, the easiest solution would be Omaha. Everybody knows it. The Rays know it. Baseball knows it. And it's not a joke. This is a very viable plan that could happen as soon as next year, with the caveat that there's so many moving parts as it pertains to the Rays right now.
And obviously all of this centers around, who's going to pay for the stadium repairs or how quickly the stadium repairs could happen. You mentioned the numbers at least in the $50 million a year range. Is that something that the city/county is all on the hook for? Do the Rays have a responsibility to this? How does that process work?
The way the Rays agreement works with the use of Tropicana Field is that it's the responsibility of the city, entirely the city, to repair Tropicana Field. That's the agreement they have. My understanding is that the agreement they have in place for this potential new stadium in the future would require the Rays to do the repair of any damage to the stadium, which like I don't think this might not be the last time a stadium in Florida is damaged, considering how frequent these hurricanes seem to be coming. But in this case, it is the responsibility of the city to repair. And like they have insurance, and there's probably money coming from the government, from FEMA. But it's going to take time, and they don't even really necessarily fully know how much damage was done. Like they did an initial report that I think they concluded like $58 million. But anyone that's done a project on their home, you start knocking down walls, you start seeing what's buried beneath what you could see, and suddenly that 55 million becomes 100 million or 150 million. They don't really know. They're not going to know till they start. And the city's kind of like, are you even going to be playing in our market a couple of years from now? Like, it's like a really big mess. I also just want to quickly point out the College World Series does not have any bearing on this plan potentially happening. The College World Series is not like a month long, right? Like you could make a Major League Baseball schedule, the Rays play 81 games in Omaha, and sort of work around the whatever number of days it's in use for the College World Series. That is not a deal breaker. Right? The San Antonio Spurs famously have to leave their stadium for like 3 weeks, arena for 3 weeks here for the rodeo. You could make it work for how long is the College World Series? 2 weeks, 10 days? It's not a month.
Yeah, there's that. But then there is the Big Ten baseball tournament, which is a couple of weeks ahead of that.
See you later.
But way back in the day at the old stadium, the Omaha Royals minor league team had to make. So, yes, They have done things. And famously, way back when, this is probably before either of you were born, but famously the Republican convention was at the Astrodome back in the 80s, and the Astros were out of there for like 3 weeks. So
wow.
There are workarounds that
you can make it work. And again, the Rays are kind of good at, or potentially.
If Omaha has the opportunity, they'll move heaven and earth to make sure that there's a good workaround.
I think the Rays are like they don't really have a lot of ability to ask for things. They're kind of desperate. They're the ones that don't have a place to play. They'll just be happy that there's a city that's willing to take them in, where they don't need to spend $100 million to make the stadium major league ready.
Jared, one more from me then. I'm curious about the timeline. Like if this is actually going to happen, what would that look like, and how soon would the parties kind of come together and agree on something?
So, okay. Rob Manfred has said publicly that he wants a plan, and that he wants sort of all of this worked out by opening day of 2025, that they know they're going to do in 2026. Whether that happens, we'll see. People I've talked to with the Rays say that they would like to have a plan in place for 26 by sometime in February, basically by the start of spring training. Now, whether that's realistic, we'll see, but that's like they would like to know soon. Like, and I do think opening day, in April, that's a reasonable goal. They do not want to be in the position they were in this year, where spring training starts in like 2 months and they don't know where they're playing that season. Like, they didn't have any choice, right? The hurricane happened in October. They had to scramble, but they don't want to be doing that again. They want their players also to know what's going on. Like, we forget, like, these players, they are people, and like they do have families, and suddenly like they don't even know like where they're going to be playing next. They didn't know, there's legitimate sort of human cost here. So I understand why everyone's like, figure this out so everyone could at least plan, whatever it is. It's not an ideal situation. Maybe for Omaha it is. You might get a major league team for a few years, but it's not an ideal situation for most people, but at least there'll be clarity. So I think the hope is opening day. Whether they meet that timeline, we'll see. But from what you're saying, it sounds like Omaha would be thrilled to have them. So
I don't think there's any question they would, at least even if it's for a temporary deal. But man, this is
fascinating.
Yeah, it is, because I kind of thought this ship had sailed, but then what's going on with the new stadium vote, and the city wanting some assurances. I would, if I had to guess, I would say more than likely they'll figure something out so that they're in Tampa. But, the fact that it's gotten to this point and people like to, muscle in and kind of strut, like politicians do.
Mm-hmm.
You never know. So
Interesting.
it's definitely worth
I
following.
agree. I do think they'll end up staying in that region ultimately. But look, that still leaves them with nowhere in 2026. Even if they fix Tropicana Field, that's not going to be ready in 2026. So there's at least 1 year. We basically know there's at least 1 year where they need somewhere to go. So even if it's a 1 year deal, it's better than nothing. And
That's
listen,
true.
Oklahoma City was once a temporary market for a sports team. And look what's happened, as a result of that temporary move to Oklahoma City. And now they've been very supportive of an NBA team for years.
Great point. Jared Diamond, Wall Street Journal. Jared, we really appreciate it. Thanks for the insight. And we will definitely keep track of this story. That's for sure.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.